I'll be talking about plasma-based particle acceleration. Bob has given a very nice introduction. This talk is essentially addressed to the beginners who have who are trying to enter into this field. So experts will have to excuse me. And Bob has already given a good introduction, so I'll be just elaborating on some of the terms and concepts so that things become more clear. So it will be like a school. So I request the experts, they can engage themselves to their own reading if they wish for. So why is there a need for plasma-based accelerators? We already saw that the conventional linear accelerators have reached their limits. There is a material breakdown limit beyond which you cannot exceed the electric field, and that limits the conventional linear accelerators. For instance, the slack length is about 3.2 kilometers and which produces 50 GeV electrons. But the plasma, which is already a broken down system, does not pose such a limit. You can have electric field which are very high because there's no breakdown constraints. And so within a short length, you can have very high energy accelerators. And in fact, for current parameters or something, you can have almost 1,000 times, they can be almost 1,000 times superior than the conventional accelerator, and we will see how that can be estimated. So what is the principle of particle accelerator? Let's see that. They are if you look at a conventional accelerator, then you have two electrodes and then a particle inside it feels an electric field and it gets accelerated. And the accelerating distance is of this order. So the distance over which the particle gets accelerated is limited by the distance between the electrodes. Within the electrodes, you cannot exceed the material breakdown limit. So you are constrained with this kind of energies which can be obtained from such a static accelerator. But now let me have an accelerator where I pull the electrodes. Then what will happen to this particle? This will always see a steady electric field and it will keep moving with the electrode. So in this case, it is possible that the particle will acquire more energy because your length will be, the accelerating length can be very large. Now the plasma-based accelerators utilize this concept in some sense because plasma can support electrostatic fields in the form of plasma waves. Here you can create charge density perturbations and they can move with a certain phase velocities which we typically choose it to be closer to c. We can do that. So it is like having, so if you have a density hump here and a density depression, then they can act as two electrodes, and since the phase velocity, if you can pull that with the velocity of light, then a particle here will always see a constant electric field and it can get accelerated over very large distances. So that is the principle behind plasma-based accelerators. So it is clear, you can see that what are the requirements? We need to excite plasma wave which moves with a phase speed which is close to c. The higher the amplitude of the wave, higher the potential difference, and so the energy acquired will be high. And the third part, which is very crucial, is that you have to inject particle at the right phase. And the particle should have a right velocity also initially so that it does not get dephased. So these three are the crucial issues which need to be technologically or physically satisfied so that this kind of concept can be made into practical use, and that indeed has been done. So based on the driving, so first question, let's come to the first question, that is, how do you excite plasma waves? So there are many schemes about which Bob talked about, so let me go through them one by one. The first one, which was used in the earlier days where the laser power was very small, and the intensities were small, and the pulse duration was very long, is the beat wave concept, where you had two electromagnetic waves and the beat frequency generated the plasma wave in the plasma, and that led to the excitation of plasma frequency, and the particle was accelerated in this kind of a system. So that's a beat wave scheme. I'll talk about more about this. The other thing is when we had lasers, now current lasers, which are of very high intense, which are of very high intensities, and they are very rapid. So you can give a very large impulse to the plasma, and that excites a wake wave. So it is like a pendulum. You can excite pendulum oscillations by either driving it with the resonant frequencies, those are the beat wave scheme in the plasma, or you can give a very high impulse to the pendulum, and that also will then make it oscillate at its own natural frequency. So here the laser acts as a very high impulse. It provides very high impulse, and the wake field produces the plasma waves in which the particles can be accelerated. So as we saw, you can do this by many kinds of particles. They can be either photon, which is achieved by the laser beam, or you can already have another particle beam from a conventional accelerator which can be sent through a plasma, and that can excite wake fields. So this is the currently this is the most favored scheme, because we have now laser intensities which are very high and they are of short pulse durations. Let's try to understand how all this leads to a creation of space charge field, and what is the order of electric field that can get generated out of it. So how large electric field can be generated in a plasma? So let's see, if this is a wavelength where you have created a charge bunch here and you evacuated it, how much can I evacuate it? I can evacuate only to the extent that the density is available. So delta n can at most be of the order of n. So the electric field that the electrostatic electric field from the Gauss's laws can be obtained in terms of this. N is the density of the plasma, so delta n by n comes here. Lambda is the typical wavelength. Now we want that the phase velocity of this particular wave should be close to c. So that, because the frequency is the plasma frequency, so from this you can calculate the wavelength that is required, because k is given by omega p by c, which is the skin depth inverse. So that gives you lambda, and then when you substitute for lambda here, you get this expression. This is delta n by n, and that, as I mentioned, can the maximum field can occur when all the particles have been evacuated from this regime. So delta n by n would be of the order of 1. Omega p is the natural frequency of the plasma, and omega p square is proportional to the plasma density, 4 pi n naught e square by m. So this, from here you can see that the electric field that you can create, the largest amplitude of the electric field that you can create, is proportional to square root of n, because this is 1, this gives square root of n, and this is n. So higher the plasma density, the electric field that you can obtain from such a system is higher. Thus, this is the relationship. Thus, if you have a plasma density of the order of 10 to the power 16, that can give you an electric field which is of the order of 10 gigavolts per meter. So let me go through the schemes, even though beat wave is out of fashion, but let me try to explain some concepts which will be similar in other kinds of waves, in other kind of excitation schemes also. So let me start with the plasma beat wave acceleration, and then we will go to other schemes as well. So how does plasma wave get excited in this case? Let's try to understand that. You have two kinds of electromagnetic waves with different frequencies, omega 1 and omega 2, and their difference is of the order of omega p, that is the plasma natural frequency of the plasma. So if these two electromagnetic waves propagate, then the longitudinal force, because you have to drive the electrons in the longitudinal direction, that is given by J1 cross B2 plus J2 cross B1. So you can see that this will generate a beat frequency between omega 1 and omega 2 and have a omega p. So this force basically pumps the plasma wave, and the phase velocity you can see is difference between omega p by delta k, because this difference in the wave vector should be the wave vector of the plasma wave, and that is nothing but equal to the group velocity of the electromagnetic wave. So this shows that the phase velocity of the plasma wave that you generate should be equal to the group velocity of the electromagnetic wave, which is typically, this can then be of order c, similar, close to c. Physically, what is happening is that you are, the beat generates a ponderomotive force. I mean, you have a spatial structure like this, and where the intensity of the light wave is high and here it is low, in these regions, basically the light pressure generates a ponderomotive force. And then, so let's understand how it, analytically, how do we get it? This was a physical picture. Let's see how we can get it analytically. So a simplified set of assumptions are these, and in the slab geometry it can be shown that if you use these equations for the plasma, the fluid equations, continuity equation, equation of motion for electrons, and Maxwell's equation for the field, then you, because this is a very, the light wave is of high frequency, the ions do not respond, and ions are assumed only to be the static background density. Choosing A, the vector potential of the light field having two frequencies, that can be considered as of this form. We seek solutions in the small powers of V by C, because I've chosen a weak relativistic limit just to show how it works. So it's a weak plasma response. So order by order, when you solve the electron momentum equation, one can show that the transverse velocity is the dominant one, is given by this, and that when you substitute to obtain the second order velocities, that will give you a ponderomotive potential and the space charge field. And from the Gauss's law, you get this expression. This is the continuity equation. So for V, when you substitute from here, you will get a forced equation of a harmonic oscillator, and there is a driver in terms of A square. So this is the natural frequency of plasma wave, and this is the driver, which is proportional to A square. And that if you want to have a resonance condition satisfied, then this this omega p should resonate with the difference frequencies of the light wave. So the natural oscillator frequency should match the frequency of the driving force. So it's a very difficult constraint. Experimentally, then it becomes very difficult that you have to match the two frequencies of the light wave precisely to the natural frequency of the plasma, which is proportional to the square root of the density. And so this is again the resonance condition, A square. When we calculate, it can balance only with this. This part can lead to the resonance. And so this is the resonant forcing, and when you solve, you can obtain, this is the n tilde that gets generated, and you can see the phase velocity, and because this is the dispersion relation of the light wave in the plasma. So when you calculate the group velocity of the light wave, then it comes to be proportional to this, and if omega p square by omega square is small, you can expand the square root and show that this is the part. So smaller the value of omega p square by omega square, you have a phase velocity which is closer to c. So if you want to have the phase speed closer to c, you should have smaller omega p square by omega square. So for fixed omega square, this needs to be small, but then the amplitude of the electric field, you cannot have it small because the amplitude of the electric field is related to the density. But if you want speed to be closer, this needs to be smaller. So now let's come what are the limitations? What is the maximal possible energy that you can excite? Can you keep on acquiring an indefinite amount of energy, or is there a limitation on energy? That's the question we are going to address. So what limits the maximum energy that the electrons can acquire? And that is limited by a concept of dephasing, which is very clear to understand. The point is that if you have a wave which is like this, and you have a particle here which is sliding down this, and then it is constantly acquiring energy or gaining speed, then there will come a time that its velocity will exceed the phase velocity of this wave, and then it will slide down and then come this side. That would be the dephasing length, because now it has got dephased. The force is now acting in the opposite direction, and the particle can no longer gain energy out of it. The particle can gain energy only if it is confined in this region of the space of the phase of the wave. So this is what will happen later on as the particle gets accelerated. So this is known as the dephasing length, and particle velocity typically is very close to c. For instance, even if you have something like a 3 MeV electron that has a gamma factor of 7, and beta which is very close to 0.99 c. So the difference, so how do we calculate the dephasing length? That will simply be given by the difference between c and the phase velocity of the light of the electrostatic wave, and that turns out to be proportional to this particular factor. So delta V causes a phase slip between the particle and the space charge wave, which causes dephasing of the particle from the accelerating field. So this is proportional again to omega p square by the light wave frequency. What is the dephasing time? That will be how much time delta V takes to propagate a distance of half the wavelength of plasma wave, and that is again, that can be calculated like this. The length will be simply c into tau d, and so you can see that this length, dephasing length, is something like this. If you exceed this length, beyond this, basically beyond this length, the particle is not going to gain any energy. So this is the maximum you can get out, maximum energy that you can get out is the force multiplied by this distance. And so that's what you can get from the typical space charge field. So Emax, if you estimate that, comes out to be something, W max will be something like this. So if mc square for electrons is half MeV, so if you have omega 1 square by omega p square, which is of the order of 1000, very underdense plasma, then that gives W max of the order of GeV. Thus, it shows that the underdense plasma will help. Okay, so this scheme is basically based on the fact that the plasma should be underdense. The laser field should be able to propagate inside the plasma. Omega, the frequency of the laser, should be higher than the frequency of the plasma wave. That is obtained from this expression itself, which shows that the energy acquired by the electrons is higher if you have this factor as very high. Now, this shows that you are getting limited by a certain dephasing length. Is there other schemes which you can avoid this constraint? So there were some proposals in which which is known as the surfertron mechanism. There, a transverse magnetic field was, it was as if you add a transverse magnetic field, then what happens that this electrons, as it gets accelerated, also turns around because of the magnetic field, and you can adjust it such that this electron never exceeds its longitudinal speed never exceeds the phase velocity of the wave. In this way, one can hope to accelerate the electron indefinitely. But then And that can be shown through mathematical analysis also. Numerically also, it has been shown that unlimited acceleration is possible. But the limitation is that as the electron turns, it has to be still in the light wave field. That means the focal spot or the spot size of the laser has to be very large. So that again limits the surfertron mechanism, and you cannot have unlimited acceleration. So you are constrained with some physical this physical limit of dephasing length in some sense. The other limitations are that in plasma, density could be inhomogeneous. That is most severe constraint. The non-linearity of plasma, instabilities, the diffraction and pump depletion, because as the laser is propagating and it's exciting plasma wave in different regions, it is losing its energy. So those are also the limitations, and one has to ensure that those lengths are how do they compare with the dephasing length. There is something very interesting about the plasma, something that was, I mean, the severe constraint in this beat wave acceleration was that you have to balance the frequencies in a very, that was a severe constraint. But it can be seen that plasma sometimes solves its own problems. So here, if you take a long pulse, then automatically it has been seen that because of the self-modulation of the pulse, the Raman scattering, it can modulate its intensity in such a fashion that so that is another scheme of excitation which is known as self-modulation laser acceleration scheme, where you do not have to match the beat wave frequency. The plasma automatically gets it matched for you, and you acquire a structure, modulated structure, which can in turn accelerate the particles in an appropriate fashion. So that was a self-consistent solution. The constraint was in this scheme automatically removed by the plasma. In other context also, I'll show that how one of the problems which was the plasma itself solves it for you in the context of acceleration. And that is the injection scheme. So this is, so these are the limitations of the beat wave acceleration. Now let me come to the second part, which is when you have short pulses. Here the laser is intense, you have short pulse, so it's like driving the pendulum with a very big, giving it a very big impulse, and so that the forcing itself creates it excites the plasma in its normal, to oscillate in a normal frequency. So it uses a very fast varying laser pulse, and it could also be a beam of charged particles. After this laser pulse or the particle pulse leave, the plasma is left behind with residual oscillations which are at the natural frequency. And unlike the beat wave acceleration, you don't have to match the resonant matching condition. But here what you require is the intensity of laser and or particle beams should be very high. So, and except for the resonant matching condition, here also all the other constraints that I talked about, dephasing length, etc., they all hold. And so you require very high intensity laser beam, and in this case, in fact, some of the limitations become very severe, because in this case, since you require very high intensity laser beams, the diffraction and pump erosions are very important issues of concern. How? Let's see that. Because first, let's look at the equations in this particular context. Again, the same. Let's take the relativistic electron momentum equation. This is Poisson wave equation. And then when you can write the momentum equation in the form of the scalar and vector potentials. And if you have only one-dimensional variables for light wave, choosing this, you can show that the final equation, the gamma square for a circular polarization can be written in terms of light wave field, and this is the longitudinal velocity component, so that the equation of momentum becomes of this form, and using appropriate normalizations, you can show that the final normalized set is this. Since if it's circularly polarized, right, gamma square will be independent of time. If we transform to a coordinate in the phase velocity frame of the light wave, use xi and tau, then only A has this kind of tau variations. This is independent of tau. So gamma, the relativistic factor, is independent of tau. And then the equation, the Paulson's equation, gives the electrostatic field profile that is required to understand the acceleration process. It depends on light intensity through this factor. This equation can be easily solved for a given profile of A square, but one should be careful that one should solve this equation self-consistently, because A square is also getting influenced by the plasma. So when this is solved, you can see for a smaller A square, this is the this is the density variation. Here you can see this is the electric field amplitude, but when the A naught is high, the density variation is also very high, and the wave is no longer sinusoidal, but it acquires a very non-linear profile. And so this density variation is this, and the field profile is very non-linear, and so this is already in the non-linear regime of the plasma wave, and that is responsible for the that can be used for the acceleration of the particles. Now the problem is that if you want to have large amplitude wave fields, as I mentioned, high intensity of laser light is suitable, and there is a severe limitation on laser intensity due to diffraction spreading, because when you have a certain spot size of laser, then in vacuum the diffraction length is given by this particular factor, where R naught is the radius and lambda naught is the wavelength of the light, and because of that there is a diffractive spreading, but that can be arrested if the amplitude of the laser intensity exceeds the relativistic limit, because that can then lead to optical guiding and reduce the spread. How does this happen? Because typically a laser beam has an intensity profile which falls off in the transverse direction. So if you have a laser spot size, then it may either have a Gaussian profile or something where it is falling, the intensity is falling off in the transverse direction, and that leads to, because the Ponderomotive force then pushes the electron out, so that leads to a hollow electron density profile radially, and the relativistic factor decreases with radius, and so you have a dielectric constant which is of this form, and when you put it here, this shows that the plasma acts like a convex focusing lens. So you have a diffraction spreading, but because of this effect, the diffractive spreading is arrested, and then the light gets focused. So then this requires that your critical power necessary for this should be such, it should exceed the critical power that is necessary for focusing the, to balance the diffraction. But when you have a laser pulse profile in the time region, the front of the profile will always have a less intensity compared to the whatever the value of the critical profile. So it shows that the front of the laser profile will continuously erode, and this acts as a severe limitation in the case of laser wake field acceleration. An interesting paper is by Tajima and Dawson, and they have, with a very interesting, in fact this is a very nice paper which some of you who are just beginning to enter into this field should go and solve this paper, because it shows how you can estimate these things by certain interesting transformations. And he uses simple physical arguments for the fact. I have sketched it out here, that what he talks about is that if you have, let's say, how much is the energy that is acquired by the electron in the transverse electric field of the electromagnetic wave. Typically, it is the quiver velocity of the electron. If you have a light wave which has, this is the electric field which oscillates, and then you have a magnetic field here with the k vector. So in this electric field, the electrons, when they exhibit transverse oscillation, they acquire a certain quiver velocity. So the transverse energy gain is given by this. This is simple, E by m omega square will come. Now this is the typical energy that gets lost by the electromagnetic wave, but that would correspond to a loss of light momenta in this fashion, because light momenta is simply energy by c. Pc is equal to energy. So this is the loss of light wave momenta in the longitudinal direction, but that should be equal to the gain of electron momenta, and where in the x direction. So the x displacement of the electron is given by this term, where tau is the light pulse duration. So you can understand how much distance the electrons will be pulled in this direction when a laser passes, a fast laser passes through it. And as soon as this pulse has passed, this typical displacement then comes back and generates the plasma oscillation. This is responsible for generating the plasma oscillation. So how much do the energy gain, how much can the electron energy gain in the generated plasma wave? That also he goes around using a very interesting argument by transforming to the rest frame of the plasmon. So here, what is the phase velocity of plasmon? As we saw, it is equal to the group velocity of the light wave. So this is the beta. So if you are transforming to the rest frame of the plasmon, then this is v phase by c, and you can say c, because we calculated the phase velocity of the plasmon in one of the earlier slides in relation to the frequency and frequency of the light and the plasma wave, and from that you can show that gamma, which will be 1 by root over 1 minus beta square, can be estimated in this fashion. So beta is the frame transformation. So when you calculate the transformation of momenta and energy in the lab, from the lab to the wave frame, you will get these answers. For the light wave, it has no momenta in the plasmon wave because the group velocity is 0, but it has a frequency which is it has an energy which is I omega p by c. It has this is the energy component. It's in the imaginary transformation that we are using. So this is because of the rest mass that a photon acquires in a plasma. And then for a plasma wave, this is if you have, this is the lab frame. In the wave frame, this the wavelength reduces, the wave vector reduces, and you get this expression. Now, one is aware that in the longitudinal electric field does not, it is invariant when you apply a Lorentz transformation. So in the lab frame, the electric field is same as in the wave frame. So the critical, and what is the critical amplitude? That is defined by the wave breaking. So wave breaking becomes very crucial. What is wave breaking? If you have a wave which is like this, and then the oscillations of the particle should be such, the amplitude of the oscillation that is created, if it exceeds a wavelength, then this wave will break. That one sees in the context of C waves, etc., that this wave will break, and that wave breaking, that's the critical amplitude up to which you can excite a plasma wave, which will lead to acceleration. So that condition is given by Kpxl as 1. So when you substitute all this, use Gauss's law, and use the fact that use this particular fact that invariance of this, one gets that the energy gain in the wave frame is of the order of gamma mc square, and gamma one already knows as a ratio of frequency of the light and the plasma wave, and then you transform back to the lab frame again by taking a minus beta, and that gives you the maximum gained energy, which is equal to 2 gamma square mc square. Again, the same expression as I had derived earlier. So you can see that the fact that if you want W max to be high, then you have to have a underdense plasma, and that the time and the length that to reach this energy is given by these expressions. So one has basically arrived at the same conclusion as we derived in the context of beat wave acceleration. So it's a very interesting paper, and those of you who are beginning to, who are interested in this field should have a look at this particular paper. So far what I have illustrated is that I have shown simplistic order of magnitude estimates in 1D, and I've shown that plasma wave moving with phase speed can be created. The amplitude dependence, maximum energy gain, etc. can be estimated, but these are all order of magnitude estimated. I didn't talk much about particle injection, but that is a main important thing. What people used to do earlier in the experiments, that once one has created a plasma wave, you have to inject an external particle at the appropriate phase. And then that itself is a very difficult task. But here too, plasma came up with a solution, because when you excite a plasma wave, which is exactly at the wave breaking amplitude, then it can inject itself at the right phase point some particles, and these particles can get accelerated with the plasma wave. So it's a solution that is provided by the system itself, and that is being used now. But earlier it was an external particle injection, but for high power laser plasma, it solves the problem itself, because you can excite plasma wave at a amplitude which is very high, and it can reach the wave breaking limit and lead to the self-injection of particles. But these are, what we need is that there is many, to estimate exactly and to come up to a very optimized configuration, it's necessary that experiments need to be performed, or one has to do simulations for that purpose. And that those can, because in reality the system is two-dimensional, 2 or 3 dimensional, so those effects cannot be estimated analytically. Then there are nonlinear plasma effects which come into picture. There are wave particle interactions. So one is seeking optimized configuration where you should have a wave configuration, the plasma wave configuration in 2D, which has its associated magnetic fields also, and the wave breaking in the 2D geometry has to be looked into. So those things become important, and they can be addressed only through simulations or experiments. So that tells you the role of simulation, which is so important, and that is what the entire day of 10th is dedicated to, where we will like to look into the fact that how fluid, particle, and other simulations would help in this direction. And so all these things will be discussed on 10th. Then there is another thing that I didn't talk about, ion acceleration. In the case of underdense plasma, what is happening is that you can see that if you have a wave structure, you have to inject a particle here. And this wave is moving with the speed of light. So this particular particle should initially also have sufficient amount of energy so that it has a speed close to the speed of light. If, for example, this is much slower than the speed of light, the dephasing will happen immediately in the opposite direction. The wave will go this way and the particle will slide back in the opposite direction. And for electrons, a slight amount of energy, for instance 2 MeV, etc., leads to a very high value of gamma, which is close to C. So that is easier achieved. But if you have heavier ions, then even if they are very energetic, they do not have, they're not totally relativistic, or they will not have a speed which is close to the speed of light, and their acceleration, so with the wake field acceleration that is in the underdense plasma becomes very difficult, because if the wave phase velocity is close to c, it will dephase immediately. So ions, it's not a good scheme for ion acceleration, and as Bob had mentioned in his talk, people are thinking of exciting plasma wave at slower speed, so that slower phase speed, so that can be used for ion acceleration. But there are other schemes in which ions can be accelerated, and they have been achieved, and that is by interacting the laser with the overdense plasma medium. And there were two different schemes which he talked about. That was the target normal sheath acceleration or the radiation pressure acceleration. These are the two different schemes. So all this we will discuss on the 10th, which is dedicated to simulation and theoretical understanding, 10th of March. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So any questions?
You've explained very nicely the maximum energy that can be achieved. So it seems to me that the crucial step is to go to multi-stages.
Yes.
Yeah. How easy is this? Is it really possible? It seems to me to be sort of quite difficult, because you've got to do it efficiently. You've got to take them from one stage and fit them into the right potential bucket in the next stage.
I don't know, experimentalists should be able to tell us more about it, but people are planning in the, I think some of the roadmaps they have mentioned that they are planning to have acceleration in stages, and several stages are being planned for that.
It is a challenge. Yes.
Could you explain self-injection in a little detail? I sort of missed that portion.
Which portion?
Self-injection.
Self-injection.
Yeah.
Okay. Actually, what happens is that if you must have seen sea waves. When they come to the shore, what happens is that you would notice that their amplitude gets, so you have a normal sea wave, and as it comes near the shore, it becomes higher, and then it acquires this shape. And then the particles fall from here, right? Something similar happens in the context of plasmas. So what is happening here? This top of the particles which are at the top, they are moving faster than this the phase speed of the wave, and that's how the particle it overturns. Something similar happens in the context of plasmas. You have an electrostatic field which gets generated. The electrostatic field amplitude is so high that the oscillation of the particles, in one oscillation, it exceeds the wavelength of the wave that you have. So what happens that the particles then they tip over, and they get so wave break. It is known as the phenomena of wave breaking, and the kinetic effects become important. So that's how.
So far, I understand there can be two possible mechanisms. One is the acceleration through wake field, and the other one is simply due to the wave breaking of the fields. So, which can be more efficient mechanism?
If you just rely on wave breaking, then it's like heating. It won't be a beam. But what we are relying is that few particles, the wave remains intact. It just gives you a few particles which move out, and they then get accelerated in a well-defined wave. So the wave is basically dithering at the wave breaking amplitude. That's the maximum amplitude, maximum for the optimized configuration. And if you are just relying on wave breaking, that suddenly you create a plasma wave and it breaks, then a lot of particles will get generated, but they will have random velocity, and that's like heating.
Okay, so they won't be creating a beam kind of.
They will not create a well-defined beam.